3 mystery riddles that'll unlock your inner detective. Time to put on your detective hats, ladies and gents. We've collected new mystery riddles that only the brightest Sherlocks can solve. Do you think you've got what it takes to crack them? Well, you're about to find out. After each riddle, you'll have 20 seconds to pinpoint the perp. If that's not long enough, don't worry. Just pause the video to give yourself more thinking time. Alright, let's get down to business. Number 1. How did the police know it was their guy? One spring day, the local police station got an emergency call from a woman in distress. Officers immediately hopped into their cruisers and sped off to the rescue, sirens ablaze. As they were approaching the house, they heard a woman's voice from inside scream, "Dave, please, don't do it!" Then, a shot was fired, followed by a dead silence. When the police rushed into the house, they saw a plumber, a firefighter, and a lawyer standing near the woman's lifeless body. It didn't take the cops any time at all to cuff the firefighter. If none of the suspects had name patches on, how did the officers know it was him? You have 20 seconds to figure out what gave the firefighter away. Perhaps he was standing near the murder weapon. Or maybe he just looked the most suspicious. Actually, it was nothing of the sort. Before the woman was shot, she shouted a man's name. But when the police entered the house, the only man they saw was a firefighter. All the rest were ladies. Number 2. What happened to Johnny? Last Wednesday, Jack Light, a wealthy businessman, was devastated when he found out that his 8-year-old son Johnny had been kidnapped. He called the police the next day, Thursday. When the detectives arrived, he was met by Jack Light himself and his 20-year-old son, James. When asked why they didn't call the police as soon as the boy went missing, it was James who explained what had happened. He said that the day before he'd gotten a phone call from the kidnappers, who warned the family not to call the police. And, of course, they demanded a ransom of $500,000 in unmarked bills to be brought to the nearest park within the next hour. Mr. Light collected the money into a briefcase without hesitation, and James went to the park to deliver it. When he was halfway to the meeting point, he heard footsteps quickly come up from behind him. He was then hit on the head and fell to the ground. Thankfully, James wasn't knocked unconscious, so he managed to see the guy running away from him with the briefcase in his hand. James said that the attacker was a redhead wearing blue jeans and a dark green V-neck sweater. With this information, the police rushed off and actually found 2 potential suspects matching the description James had given. Interestingly enough, both guys tried to run from the police when they were stopped. The first suspect said that he fled because he was afraid of getting in trouble for the taser he had on him for protection, given that this weapon was a violation of local stun gun laws. The second suspect was a homeless guy that ran because he thought he was in trouble for panhandling. The next day, the detective came back to Mr. Light's residence with good news. He informed the worried father that although they hadn't found the briefcase and the money, they did know who the kidnapper was. Do you know who the detective had in mind? You've got 20 seconds to decide. It was the brother, James Light. He had described the kidnapper as wearing a V-neck sweater. But how could he know that if the guy was running away from him and he only saw the back of his attacker? James was obviously lying, albeit very detailed and convincing. Number 3. Who's the criminal ringleader? A SWAT team got an order to raid a remote farmhouse. According to investigators, a gang of kidnappers was hiding out there with their boss. The gang leader was described as being an Asian woman in her early to mid-20s. When the police entered the house, they found 3 young Asian women locked in a room. The girls claimed that they'd been kidnapped by the gang. But if the mastermind of the gang was a young woman too, how could the police be sure that she wasn't right there in front of them pretending to be one of the victims? Well, they decided to figure that out by interviewing each one. The first girl said her name was Akane, and she'd been locked in the room for a month. She was abducted on her way home from work. The second young woman told them her name was Hannah, and she'd been locked in the house for 2 months. The criminals were planning to sell her abroad. As for the third girl, whose name was Eka, she'd been locked in the room for 3 months, and she was so grateful to the police for rescuing her. After the investigators listened to all the statements, they did end up finding that the gang leader was hiding among the victims, and they arrested her right away. Who was pretending? And how did the police understand which of the girls was the criminal? You have only 20 seconds to unravel the mystery. If you need more time, just pause the video. Are you still struggling to find the right answer? Alright, here's a little hint. Pay attention to not only their statements, but also their hair color. We told you to pay attention to their hair, and here's why. Everybody knows that Asians have naturally dark hair. We can clearly see that Eka doesn't dye her hair, but Akane and Hannah do. And when brunettes dye their hair blonde, their dark roots start to show as their hair grows over time. So Eka, who was sporting her natural hair color, could be crossed off the suspect list immediately. Hannah spent 2 months in captivity, which obviously means that she couldn't touch up her roots. By looking at her, we can tell by her dark roots that she was telling the truth. This leaves us with Akane, who said that she'd been in captivity for a month. Now, if we consider the fact that the average person's hair grows about ½ an inch per month, it becomes clear as day that this woman was lying. Her freshly dyed roots gave her away as the criminal ringleader disguised as a victim. Book her, boys! Did you get all the answers right? Tell us in the comments below how many riddles you managed to solve. Challenge all your friends by sharing this video with them, and remember to give it a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to our channel if you enjoy watching funny, thought-provoking, and informative videos, because we've got all that and more on the bright side of life.